Let's listen to someone talk about his experience with type 1 diabetes.
My name is Karl Daniels. I am a type 1 diabetic, and I've been a diabetic since December 27, 2003. When I was first diagnosed as a diabetic, I was actually rushed to the emergency room. My blood sugar was actually 529. I had actually had the symptoms for probably about 3 weeks, but really didn't know that I was a diabetic or I was suffering from the diabetic symptoms. I thought I possibly had a stomach flu or stomach virus or something like that. Some of the symptoms that I received were blurry vision, dry throat, thirsty all the time, frequent urinations, probably every 30 minutes. I developed a rash on one of my legs. What are some other ones? Hungry all the time, sleepy all the time as well. I mean, I developed just about every single symptom that you can think of as far as being a diabetic. Some of the lifestyle changes that I needed to make since I'm a type 1 diabetic is the pre-planning of my meals. I would actually need to test my blood sugar before each meal as well as 2 hours after each meal. Since I am a type 1 diabetic, I have to give insulin injections. So my first year as being a diabetic, I was basically giving myself anywhere between 6 to 8 injections a day, you know, which would do a lot of wear and tear on the body. With this, I only have to give myself an injection once every 3 days. I have an insertion spot on either my stomach or on the back or on my hip or in the back of the arms. They say that those are the key areas as far as proper insulin sensitivity to actually get into the blood cells and to maintain proper blood sugar levels. Pre-planning of meals. I need to count every single carbohydrate that I intake for each meal and every meal, and it's just time consuming. I mean, the average person can just eat whatever they want whenever they feel like it, but me, I have to sit there and plan and prep, as well as, you know, my food gets cold after a while. Some of the difficulties that I've personally faced as being a type 1 diabetic are going into hypoglycemia, which is having a low blood sugar, can totally take your concentration, involvement, activities totally out of whack. I mean, it feels like you almost been hit by a Mack truck, and you don't want to do anything else for the rest of the day. All you want to do is just, you know, increase your blood sugar and just go to sleep and forget about, you know, schoolwork or anything else that you may be faced with.
Now, as Karl was describing, when a type 1 diabetic, the insulin-producing capacity of our pancreas is destroyed.
That's right.
So he must take, and that's why he described the pump that he takes.
He has
that
an
actually,
insulin pump, right.
And now, does he trigger the insulin pump, or is the insulin pump sensitive? Is it able to tell when he needs insulin?
No, it's what we call an open loop system, and that's why he was talking about all the planning he has to do. Once the pancreas no longer makes any insulin, then you're dependent on insulin injections your entire life. And so Karl has a pump that continuously infuses insulin every hour throughout the 24-hour period. And then with each meal, he has to push a button. He has to calculate how much insulin he needs to take based on what he's going to eat and what type of activity he's going to do, and then push a button and it will bolus that insulin to cover that meal. And then he measures a couple hours after meal to make sure that he's made the right guesstimate. And so he's constantly monitoring, assessing, and making adjustments. And he's a very good athlete, and so he also has to take into consideration the intensity and the duration of the exercise he's going to use, because if he overexerts and consumes too much glucose and his insulin is not shut down, he can develop low blood sugar or hypoglycemia, what he was talking about. And the other thing that's really interesting, when he talked about time, Dr. Schwartz has recently done a study.
And this is someone you work with, Dr.
Who's one of our
Schwartz.
associates in the Diabetes Center, and they've shown that the average type 1 diabetic, it takes at least 2 hours out of your life to plan, to meal preparation, monitoring, doing the blood sugars, going to the doctor, getting the lab work. So this is a very labor-intensive condition if you're going to take care of.
Some of the symptoms that Karl was describing when he didn't know he had the disease, when he was first taken to the hospital, excessive thirst, excessive urination, excessive hunger, feeling very faint, What causes, maybe Karen, okay, what causes those symptoms?
Okay. Remember I said that a non-diabetic's blood sugar rarely goes above 135 or 140. Once your blood sugar is above 200 milligrams, your kidney cannot reabsorb all of that glucose, so you start dumping glucose into your urine. And glucose is an osmotic attractant, so it pulls water also. And so you're getting an osmotic diuresis. You're actually just losing fluid, so you start getting excessive thirst. Well, secondly, even though your blood sugar is high, if you don't have insulin, you can't get it into the cell. So your blood levels are high, but your tissues are starved for glucose, and that's why he was hungry.
And that's why he's both very thirsty and urinating a lot too.
And fatigued and feeling starved. So all of those. Then thirdly, once the blood sugar goes into the 200, 300, 400 range, cognitive function is actually impaired. So you can actually develop mild swelling of the brain where you're not functioning like you should. So you're not as alert. You can actually go into a coma from that.
And that's what a diabetic coma is. Let's listen to someone talk about their experience with type 2 diabetes, and then we'll talk a little bit about the differences between type 1 and type 2.
My name is Erin Joyner. I have type 2 diabetes, and I've had it for about 6 years now. Well, my symptoms prior to being diagnosed, probably about a couple years before that, I had started drinking a lot of stuff, like water, and I had actually lost about 50 pounds in a very short period of time, probably about a 2-month period of time, and it wasn't because of any extra activity or anything on my part. And I was just like, great. I didn't really think anything about it. And I noticed that I was getting up in the middle of the night and urinating a lot in the middle of the night and everything like that, and didn't think anything about it. Oh, at first I was actually, even on type 2, I was actually insulin dependent at first, and that was really major. It's just when you're insulin dependent, you have to be on a tight schedule. You had to have a certain number, you had to count the exact number of carb grams you had per meal and had the snacks. And I remember the first time I was in school during that time, I remember the first time when I got low on my diabetes, and I just started, and I felt it, and I felt dizzy. I just started crying and crying and crying, and I didn't know what to do. You take things like that for granted, like what you're allowed to eat, and it's really frustrating. One of my biggest frustrations was having to explain to my friends and family. Like every time I picked up something to eat, them critiquing it, and I'm just like, I'm allowed to eat it. I'm like, I didn't have, I'm supposed to have 30 carb grams in this meal. Can I eat my popcorn without you telling me to eat a carrot? And that was like my biggest frustration, and just the lifestyle changes as being a young adult, because you have to eat these square meals on a certain schedule, and when you're, especially in high school, you don't think about that. You go to the vending machines and go, and there's not a lot of options. You have to have pre-prepared meals. There's not a lot of options in hot lunches or in vending machines for diabetics. The advice I would give to people with diabetes, especially young people, is take care of it now, because one of the things that I wish that I am learning now, and I'm glad I'm learning because I think I'm kind of ahead of the game, is that the effects might not show right away, but down the line they will show. And if you don't take care of it now, you'll be sorry. I think my mom told me this quote that's from an athlete who said, if I knew then what I know now, I would take care of my body a lot better.